In the heart of Lagos, where modern glass buildings stood beside aging colonial relics, the Lagos High Court loomed over the bustling streets. The sun blazed down on its towering white pillars, casting long shadows on the courthouse steps. A crowd had gathered outside, journalists adjusting their cameras, murmuring onlookers whispering in hushed tones. Inside, the atmosphere was thick with anticipation, the air heavy with the scent of polished wood and old law books. At the center of the grand courtroom, Zina stood tall, her black robe flowing as she faced the judge. Her sharp gaze remained fixed ahead, unwavering, unreadable. She had fought too hard, endured too much, to let emotions betray her now. Across the room sat Amara, her stepmother, the woman who had once tried to erase her from existence. Amara's hands trembled against the defense table, her face drained of its usual arrogance. For the first time in her life, she was powerless. The judge, an older man with deep lines of wisdom etched into his face, adjusted his glasses and let the silence stretch a moment longer. Then, in a voice that carried the weight of finality, he spoke. This court finds the defendant, Amara Nwosu, guilty of attempted murder. A stunned hush fell over the courtroom. Then, like a wave crashing onto shore, gasps and murmurs rippled through the spectators. A journalist scribbled frantically, capturing the moment. A law student whispered to his colleague, his eyes wide with admiration for the woman who had just made history. At the defendant's table, Amara's lips parted, but no words came. Her breath came in shallow, uneven gasps. No, this isn't real, she mumbled, as though willing time to reverse itself. The walls seemed to close in around her, the weight of her past crushing her all at once. Zina stepped forward, her voice calm, her words razor-sharp. You tried to bury me, but you forgot. I was a seed. Amara's eyes darted to her, filled with something Zina had never seen before. Fear, true, raw fear, not of the law, but of the reckoning that had finally caught up with her. The judge's gavel came down, sealing her fate. The doors to the courtroom swung open, allowing the afternoon sun to flood the room. As Amara was led away in handcuffs, the sound of her shackles echoing through the chamber, Zina turned toward the exit. Without a glance back, she stepped into the golden light, victorious. In a quiet neighborhood on the outskirts of Lagos, where mango trees swayed lazily in the afternoon breeze and children's laughter echoed through narrow streets, Zina's world had once been perfect. Their modest home, though not the grandest, was filled with warmth. Her father, Kwame, a respected businessman, doted on her, and her mother, Sada, was the heart of their home. A woman with a kind smile and a voice that could calm any storm. Even as a child, Zina had big dreams. She would sit on the floor beside her mother, flipping through old law books Kwame had bought, tracing the words with tiny fingers, pretending to argue cases before an imaginary judge. One day, I'll wear a black robe and stand in a real courtroom, she would say with unshakable confidence. Said would smile, tucking a stray curl behind her daughter's ear. And you'll be the best lawyer Nigeria has ever seen. But dreams shatter in an instant. One fateful evening, Said fell ill. A sudden fever stole her warmth, turning her once bright eyes dull and distant. Zina clung to her, whispering prayers, refusing to believe that her mother, her greatest protector, was slipping away. But fate was cruel. By morning, Sade was gone. Grief wrapped its cold fingers around their home. Kwame changed. The once vibrant man became a shadow of himself, drowning in sorrow. And in his loneliness, he made a decision that would alter Zina's life forever. He remarried. Amara entered their home like a storm, beautiful and elegant, but with eyes that held no warmth. At first, she played the role of the devoted wife, bringing Kwame tea, placing a gentle hand on his shoulder. But when he wasn't looking, her gaze would land on Zina, cold, assessing, resentful. To Amara, Zina was an obstacle. The child was too smart, too loved, too much in the way. She could see how Kwame's world still revolved around his daughter, how even in his grief he held Zina close, promising to fulfill all of Sadie's dreams for her, and that meant Zina would inherit everything. Amara's hands clenched into fists whenever Kwame spoke of his daughter's future, of the law school she would one day attend, of the legacy she would carry forward. She had not married a broken man just to play second to a child. Zina, though young, sensed the shift. She noticed how Amara's smiles never quite reached her eyes, how her words, though sweet in front of Kwame, carried hidden thorns when they were alone. Then, slowly, The cruelty began. A missing notebook before an important school test. A forgotten lunch when Kwame wasn't home. A harsh slap when no one was around to hear her cry. And yet, Zina did not break. She studied harder, learned to cook her own meals, grew sharper with each unkind word, each small act of sabotage. She still dreamed of becoming a lawyer, still clutched the books her mother had once given her, reading late into the night by candlelight. But Amara was not satisfied with mere suffering. She wanted Zina gone. The night was quiet, with only the distant chirping of crickets and the occasional rustle of the mango trees outside. Inside the dimly lit dining room, Zina sat at the wooden table, her stomach growling as she stared at the steaming plate of jollof rice in front of her. The rich aroma of tomatoes, spices, and roasted chicken filled the air. But something felt off. Across from her, Amara watched with an unsettling smile, her fingers tapping lightly against the table. "Eat, child," she said sweetly. "You've been studying all day. You need your strength." Zina hesitated. Her stepmother had never cared whether she ate or not before. In fact, there were days she was forced to go to bed hungry because Amara had forgotten to leave her any food. But now, there was a full plate in front of her. It didn't make sense. Before she could take a bite, the front door burst open. Chidi, her best friend since childhood, rushed in, laughing breathlessly. "Zina, you won't believe what happened at school today." He stopped, sniffing the air. His eyes widened. "Is that jollof rice?" Zina grinned, momentarily forgetting her unease. "Yeah. You want some?" Chidi didn't need to be asked twice. He grabbed a spoon and scooped a big bite straight from her plate. "Mmm," he mumbled through a mouthful. "This is so—" Then he froze. His spoon clattered to the floor as his body jerked violently. His hands clutched at his throat, his face contorting in agony. A strangled gasp escaped his lips before he collapsed onto the floor, writhing in pain. Zina screamed. She dropped to her knees, shaking him desperately. "Chidi, what's wrong?" Panic seized her as his breathing turned ragged, his eyes rolling back. Amara rushed over, gasping dramatically. "Oh dear, what's happening to him?" she cried, placing a trembling hand on her chest. But Zina saw something strange, a flicker of something in Amara's eyes. It wasn't fear, it was disappointment, and suddenly, it clicked. The food. Zina's heart pounded as she looked at the untouched plate, then at Chidi, still convulsing on the floor. The food was meant for her. She turned to Amara, her hands shaking. You did this." Amara's face hardened for a split second before she forced a look of concern back onto it. "Don't be ridiculous, girl. Why would I poison your friend?" But Zina knew the truth now. Her stepmother had just tried to kill her, and she had no doubt she would try again. The sun was setting, casting a golden glow over the narrow path leading to the river. The air smelled of damp earth and wildflowers, and the distant croaking of frogs mixed with the gentle rustling of leaves. It was a peaceful evening. Too peaceful. Amara walked ahead, her long wrapper swaying with each step. She glanced back at Zina, forcing a smile. "Come, child," she said, her voice unusually soft. "It's been too long since we've taken a walk together." Zina hesitated. After Chidi's poisoning, she had become wary. She watched Amara more closely, noticed the way her smiles never reached her eyes, how her kindness came only when Kwame was around. But tonight, Kwame was away on business, and for some reason, Amara wanted to take her to the river. Still, refusing would raise suspicion. So, she nodded and followed. The river came into view, a wide, rushing body of water, swollen from recent rains. The current moved fast, carrying fallen leaves and broken branches downstream. The bridge that crossed it was just ahead, but Amara stopped at the riverbank instead, right at the edge where the ground was damp and slippery. "Look at the water," Amara murmured, staring into the swirling depths. "So strong, so unforgiving." Zina shivered. Something about her tone made her skin crawl. Then, before she could react, cold hands shoved her from behind. Her world flipped upside down. She plunged into the river, icy water swallowing her whole. The current yanked her under, pulling her away from the shore. She thrashed, trying to scream, but water filled her mouth, choking her. The river roared in her ears, drowning out every other sound. Above the surface, she glimpsed Amara standing at the edge, watching. No panic, no calls for help, just quiet satisfaction. Then, slowly, she turned and walked away. She wasn't coming back. Zina kicked and fought against the raging water, her limbs growing heavier by the second. Her lungs burned. Was this how it would end? All her dreams, all her struggles, washed away like nothing. Just as her strength was failing, a strong arm grabbed her. She was yanked upward, breaking through the surface with a desperate gasp. A deep, steady voice cut through the chaos. "Hold on, child." Through blurry vision, she saw a man, a fisherman with dark, weathered skin and kind but serious eyes. Obasi. He pulled her onto his wooden boat, his hands firm yet gentle. She collapsed, coughing up water, her body shaking violently. Obasi draped a rough blanket over her shoulders, watching her carefully. "You were meant to die tonight," he said, his voice calm but knowing. "But fate has other plans." Zina stared at him, her breath still unsteady. He placed a hand on her shoulder. "You must survive, child. Your destiny is greater than you know." And in that moment, as the boat rocked gently beneath them, Zina knew he was right. Amara had tried to kill her twice. It wouldn't happen a third time. The house that once held her childhood memories now felt like a prison, and Amara was its warden. Every shadow seemed dangerous, every meal a potential death sentence. Zina knew one thing for certain. If she stayed, she wouldn't survive. So, one moonless night, while the village slept, she packed what little she had: a threadbare dress, a notebook, and the small silver locket that once belonged to her mother. She stuffed them into a cloth bag, took one last look at her father's house, and vanished into the night. The road to Lagos was long, unforgiving. She walked for miles, hiding in the backs of carts, slipping past guards at train stations, surviving on scraps from strangers who pitied the lone girl with haunted eyes. She didn't beg, she didn't cry, she just kept moving. By the time she reached the city, exhaustion pressed against her bones, but there was no time to rest. Lagos was loud, fast, and cruel to those with empty pockets. She needed to survive. She took any job she could find, washing dishes in street restaurants, carrying crates in the market, scrubbing floors in people's homes. The pay was little, but she saved every coin, knowing that her dream was too important to abandon. At night, when others slept, she read old law books she found at a second-hand stall, whispering legal terms to herself under dim streetlights. But Lagos was not just a city of struggle, it was also a city of opportunity. One evening, as she cleaned the floors of a small law firm, her voice caught the attention of someone who would change her life forever. Madame Ifeoma, the lawyer, a woman with sharp eyes and an even sharper mind, watched as Zina arranged legal documents on a desk with careful precision. "You understand what these are?" she asked. Zina hesitated, then nodded. "Contracts. This one is for land ownership. This one is for business partnership." Madame Ifeoma raised an eyebrow. "And you're just a cleaner?" Zina lowered her gaze. "For now." That answer impressed Madame Ifeoma more than anything. From that day, the woman took her under her wing, allowing her to sit in on cases, teaching her things that no book could. Zina absorbed everything like a sponge. Madame Ifeoma saw the fire in her, a fire that couldn't be extinguished by hardship. So when Zina applied for a law school scholarship, Madame Ifeoma didn't just encourage her, she fought for her. When the letter arrived, Zina's hands trembled as she opened it. She had won the scholarship. Tears slipped down her face. Not tears of sadness, but of victory. Amara had tried to destroy her, but she had only made her stronger. That night, Zina didn't just dream of becoming a lawyer. She promised herself she would become the kind of lawyer who made the wicked pay. The years of struggle had hardened her, sharpened her mind like a blade. Zina walked across the graduation stage, not just as a law student, but as the top of her class. The applause thundered around her, but she barely heard it. This was just the beginning. Lagos knew her name now, the fearless lawyer who fought for the voiceless, the one who stood against the corrupt and never backed down. She built her reputation on cases that others were too afraid to touch: land disputes against powerful men, fraud cases, exposing government officials, and defending innocent people who had no one else. Her victories weren't just legal wins, they were warnings. To the corrupt, she was a storm on the horizon. To the oppressed, she was hope wrapped in a black lawyer's robe. One evening, as she sat in her office reviewing files, an assistant dropped a thick case folder on her desk. "New client," the assistant said. "Fraud and attempted murder charges." Zina flipped open the file, skimming through the details. Then she saw the name, Amara. Her heart didn't race. Her hands didn't shake. Instead, a slow, cold smile formed on her lips. Fate had brought her full circle. The woman who had tried to erase her, who had poisoned her food, who had pushed her into a river, was now the accused. And the person standing between her and freedom, the girl she once tried to kill. The courtroom brimmed with anticipation. Reporters scribbled furiously, murmurs rippled through the audience, and every eye fixated on the woman standing tall in her black robe. Zina exuded confidence, her gaze steady, her hands firm on the table before her. On the other side, Amara sat stiffly, her fingers clenched together. The once dominant woman now looked small, trapped in a place where charm and deceit held no weight. Zina stepped forward, her voice sharp and unwavering. "This is not just about fraud, this is about attempted murder." A ripple of shock spread through the courtroom. Whispers broke out, some people turning to each other in disbelief. Amara flinched, her eyes darting to the judge, to her lawyer, to the exit, as if searching for a way to escape. But there was none. Zina continued, laying out the case with ruthless precision. Financial records showed Amara's greed. Witness statements painted a picture of cruelty. But the final blows came from those who had seen the truth firsthand. Obasi, the fisherman, stepped up to the stand. "I saw her push that girl into the river," he said plainly. "She walked away as if nothing had happened. Then, Madame Ifeoma took her place. She tried to kill her own stepdaughter," she said. But fate had other plans. Amara's mask finally cracked. Sweat beaded on her forehead. Her fingers trembled. Her lips parted as if she wanted to protest. But the evidence spoke louder than any excuse she could invent. Zina approached slowly, her voice softer now, but no less powerful. "You tried to erase me. You wanted me gone, forgotten. But here I stand." The judge's gavel struck. The court finds Amara Onwudiwe guilty on all charges. She is sentenced to 20 years in prison. A sharp cry escaped Amara's lips as guards approached. Her eyes filled with desperation, locked onto Zina. "Please, have mercy." Zina met her gaze, unreadable. Then, with the faintest smile, she replied, "Mercy? That's something you never gave me." As Amara was led away, Zina stepped outside, inhaling deeply. The city stretched before her, alive with possibilities. The battle was won, but her fight for justice was far from over. The heavy courtroom doors swung open, letting in a gust of warm air as Zina stepped outside. The moment she had fought for, dreamed of, bled for, had finally arrived. Behind her, the echoes of Amara's pleas still lingered, but they held no power anymore. The woman who once ruled over her life with cruelty now stood in shackles, powerless, defeated. Amara's voice cracked with desperation. "Zina, please, I raised you." Zina turned slightly, her expression unreadable. "You tried to kill me." Her voice was steady, not angry, not vengeful, just a simple truth that no excuse could erase. Justice has been served. With that, she stepped forward, letting the past fade behind her. The sun bathed her face, a warmth she hadn't felt in years. But this time, it wasn't just the sun. It was freedom. It was victory. Reporters crowded around, cameras flashing, microphones shoved toward her. But Zina paid them no mind. There was work to do. Her victory wasn't just for herself. It was for every child who had suffered in silence, every girl told she wasn't strong enough to fight back. She walked toward her office, where a new case file awaited her. Another victim, another battle, another chance to prove that no amount of cruelty could break a soul determined to rise. Zina's story proves that no amount of evil can stop a determined soul. When life knocks you down, rise stronger. When they try to bury you, grow beyond their reach. If you loved this story, don't stop here. Watch the next video on your screen for more powerful tales of resilience and justice. Stay inspired, stay unstoppable.